This is Seth Rowland, president of Bosch Systems. By now you have likely reviewed a number of our video tours of completed and fully customized applications and may have wondered how this magic is done. This video tour is an under-the-hood guide to one of our fully articulated template sets. At the first level, there is a library, and the library has a series of templates which you can preview as you go through them to do what you need to do in lending. We also have standard inserts such as cover pages and other special inserts such as signature blocks and whatnot built into the system. One thing that you may not have noticed is that at the top of this particular set we have a master. This is a master component file, and in fact in this system the only reason you would ever need to even go into this library would be to edit the templates. Everything can be done from the assembly of the master document. If you look in the preview window, you can see that we have allowed the user the option of inserting all the relevant documents that are selected into one master file, or of assembling them as individual separate files. All templates point to a single master component file, which controls a single cohesive interview. In HotDocs, that single component file can be edited via a component manager. We can look at variables, numbers by type. You can look at computation variables. You can get a hold of your dialogues to review them and refine them. You can look at merge text options, list formats, and whatnot. If you're looking for a particular object, you can just simply start typing it, and the system will filter down to show the objects that meet that criteria. If you're looking for a particular object or a particular phrase, there is a find function, and I can find anything that contains the word state and will filter down my list. Each of these would contain the word state either in a prompt or in a variable or in a computation. HotDocs has a powerful scripting language that you can use and access via the computation component. This particular one, property address line, lets you take a property address and merge all the different variables together into a list of streets and various other items. Here we're dealing with multiple lots and different streets, and it will produce a list of all the relevant properties. This particular editor has all sorts of context-sensitive fills. If I were to start typing in borrower A and hit Control Space, I can instantly see all the fields that match that. If instead I type something that wasn't a field, the editor tells me that the script is invalid and will usually point me to the variable that's invalid. In this case, it's color-coded in black. I could change that color to any other particular type that I want. In developing a cohesive and comprehensive interview, one of the key elements is scripting of dialogue components. Bosch Systems uses very strict naming conventions so that objects can be identified by their role and type at a glance. In this case, we're opening a lender dialog. If you were to work with HotDocs Standard, you would get this dialog, but you would not have the ability to control the layout of the fields on the dialog or to access the scripting language to determine what rules govern the appearance or disappearance or values of particular fields. In this case, we have a hide all command, and then we selectively show. We have defaulting values of certain text and various conditions for running this particular dialog. If we were to hit test, and this is recommended, you can test out your script. We can choose a bank, and you'll see that the script, which told us to hide certain fields, is now visible. If we choose other, you'll notice that it's actually set some values and is showing us those fields. Similarly, we might have a different loan officer. From this particular place, we can edit the dialog component, or we can edit an individual field and change the properties, such as default merge text, prompt, and otherwise, as well as setting such options as who the default, in this case, lender would be. There are two ways to run and determine the interview in HotDocs. One approach is to place variables on dialogs, and then if the template uses a particular variable, the dialog it is associated with comes up. Our systems are driven not by templates, but by a scripted interview which asks all relevant questions and gathers the essential data, the master data, and then lets you choose and run the documents. This is done through an interview computation. Our interviews contain various ask statements, and then depending upon the answers, we ask follow-up dialogues. In addition to that, we may run certain computations that will go through and populate sublists throughout the system. Borrower signatories is one of those items, which looks through the various list of signatories in the system and sets certain values which are used in the template. If I were to run the system, you would see an initial interview like this. There will be very few subdialogues because we haven't yet selected the type of transaction, or the closing date. In this particular system, we have a whole range of documents that you can choose to include: promissory note, mortgage, closing checklist, and you have the option of producing them as separate files or as a single file. Now, we have not yet started putting in any data. I have switched to an answer file that has some data, and you'll see it gives a little data summary on the right. If you are running a test assembly of the master as opposed to a test of the interview computation, you would have the ability to preview the selected documents. We click on Doc Preview, and it shows us the documents that we've created based upon the data. We have the ability to double-click on a particular dialog field and literally change the data from the preview. In this case, I've just changed the address and it's rippled through the entire document. We're back in test mode, and in test mode you have the ability to go edit a particular component. Those buttons that you saw were computations. At compute command, calling a computation which did various activities, we can actually look at that computation. And we can see that this computation is going to simply clear values or set them to false when you choose to clear all the checkboxes. There are hundreds and thousands of potential computations. Some of the computations can be used to even serve as functions. Taking a base state and subtracting a day. Formatting a date in an unusual manner. HotDocs can also display the results through the additional text object right on the screen and run the math. You can lay it out, indicate what you've done, and it can run summaries and requirements and give you an idea of what computed data will be found in the document based upon information that you entered in the interview. You may have an initial closing date and all dates are calculated directly from that date. You may have a subscription agreement with various shares and all share amounts and payments are credited based upon the amount of the loan. A recent addition to HotDocs with HotDocs 2005 was a connector object out to Outlook. You can map fields to an Outlook contact record and then simply click Select. This will pull up Outlook. You can select your record. When you double click on the selected record, it brings that data right into the interview based upon matching fields. Let us turn now to the HotDocs template and some of the tips and tricks that Bosch Systems uses. One of them is that in this particular document we had a series of cover pages to the mortgage, note, and various other ancillary documents that were asking for the same set of fields and the same data. What we did is we turned that into an independent template module which you can access directly from here. If I double click on the Insert button, HotDocs gives me the option to actually edit this template. This template borrows certain standard language, but you'll notice that certain paragraphs are conditional depending upon the type of document which is invoking this particular cover page and the data that's there. To have had to reproduce this 10 times in 10 different templates would have led to the possibility of inconsistencies as we made revisions through the system. But by pulling it out of the template into a separate module, we can make changes that globally affect the complete system. One of the keys to doing this is that we have a set command that sets the document type and the loan amount before it invokes the cover page and then passes those values into that inserted document. Similarly, as we go through the document, we've taken some complex issues such as borrower address and lender address and turned them into computations. That put in all the complex script depending upon the amount of information that's been supplied during the interview. We also create computations that serve as functions. One of the most difficult things to do is to deal with fractions. And in this particular case, we have a computation that sets a value and passes it to a function, which then runs a script, tests for the number of decimals, and puts in the appropriate language and fractional share. From the content editor's perspective, it removes much of the blue code and complex code out of the template into the hands of the developer and allows them to focus on the legal adequacy of the content. Similarly, there are functions which will test a field and check whether there's a period in it so that you'll not have double periods at the end of a particular sentence. Fairly simple computation, but not one that's obvious. The document is fully styled. We have other computations and functions that deal with the phrasing. And again, the goal is to make the template look as readable as possible so that it can be maintained and not let the coding get in the way of the document. When it comes to the signature, since there are all sorts of possibilities, we have a similar computation that actually puts in the whole structure and puts in the fields. The benefit of this is we can modify this once, and this signature block applies to all documents. In conclusion, this is just a tip of the iceberg of under the hood what can be done with HotDocs. We encourage you to look at the demonstrations of completed systems, the video tours to see how it can be modified. This video was intended to show you some of the tools that HotDocs gives you to build fairly sophisticated and dynamic systems in a fairly short time period. Thank you for listening.